How could a major city, a city that could raise thousands of men in its army, a city that had agriculture, trees, grass, fruit and grapes, be missed by other nations? How could a major city with walls, temples, and public buildings not be found in the annals of other nations, especially if it was a merchant city that undertook trade with all the nations around it? And most puzzling of all is that when we go to the physical location of this ancient city, we find that there is no early archaeological record. It was an insignificant location, not even on a trade route. Many historians today have come to the conclusion that the accounts of the founding of Islam are all myths. Obviously, there is a great discrepancy between what Islamic records tell us and what the archaeologists have been finding, so the conclusion they draw is that the Islamic records are just fabricated myths.
In my years of study, I have become convinced that the early records are not myths, but that they refer to another location that fits all of these descriptions. I believe that Muhammad was born and raised in another place, and that Muslims are facing the wrong direction when they pray. According to commonly accepted Islamic history, the Kaaba was a major shrine in the city of Mecca and the focus of pilgrimage in Arabia. A good starting place might be studying the pilgrimage before the founding of Islam.
وكما دون المؤرخ الطبري بأن هناك كان نوعان من الحج والعمرة. الحج الأكبر أو الحج الأصغر. وكان جد محمد كان يؤدي العمرة قبل الإسلام.
This Umrah, before Muhammad, was at a time when the focal point of Arabian pilgrimage was to a place known as the Forbidden Gathering Place. This location held many pagan idols.
وهذه الأسماء كانت موجودة قبل الإسلام، ولكن ما زال المسلمين إلى حد هذا الآن يستخدمون نفس الأسماء، ولكن هي الأسماء هذه إيتنا من الخارج، يعني من الوثنية، ليس أسماء إسلامية.
In order for us to understand what was happening in pre-Islamic Arabia, we need to understand the importance of holy places in ancient Arabia. From ancient times, Middle Eastern religions have equated gods with regions rather than being universal. Modern readers of history have long been influenced by Greek and Roman concepts of the pantheon of gods and have failed to realize the significance that the ancient Arabs applied to gods of specific regions. In the eyes of the ancient Arabs, there were gods who lived in Mesopotamia, gods who lived in Egypt, and gods who lived in Greece, and so on. Arab merchants passing through an area would respect the local gods. They were not opposed to gods of different places. What they were opposed to was the representation of a god in human or animal form. They preferred to use geometric shapes. For instance, here is a god in the shape of a block. That one over there is shaped as a triangle. Each of these gods were considered local gods and must be respected when passing through their territory.
Such a view of religion naturally leads to accepting territories and locations as being sacred to specific gods. Thus, the area around a temple, such as a particular valley or remote desert location, could be considered as sacred. It would have a precinct where people could gather, even with their enemies, and be safe, because violence was forbidden in the sacred precincts.
When tourists enter the majestic beauty of Wadi Rum here in southern Jordan, they're so often taken up with the exquisite beauty of this valley and the rugged mountains that they miss a temple dedicated to the goddess Lat, or Allat as some call her. This Nabatean temple had a sacred area. It was located in front of the temple, with the mountains marking off the sacred area.
Before Islam, Arabs were divided into many groups. They worshipped different gods and often fought amongst themselves over tribal issues. The one thing that held them together was the pilgrimage to a common ancient meeting place. The Quran calls this Masjid al-Haram, or the forbidden gathering place. Masjid means gathering and is translated mosque today. Before Islam, there were no mosques, so the masjid was simply a gathering place. The forbidden gathering place was a sacred place of refuge and security, where regular activities ceased and violence was forbidden, or haram. The concept of haram, or forbidden, is very strong in Islam.
في القرآن ذكر المسجد الحرام، وهو المسجد الحرام في المدينة الإسلامية المقدسة، ويعتبر المسجد الحرام وما حواليه من المدن هو منطقة محرمة.
Allah has made Mecca a sacred sanctuary, and it was a sanctuary before and will be so after. None is allowed to uproot its shrubs, or cut its trees, or hunt its game.
So we have two descriptions of the original holy city of Islam. It was a haram place where killing was forbidden, and it was the focus of the pilgrimage for many centuries before the founding of Islam. Now look here, much of the graffiti found throughout the Negev and southern Jordan was written by people on pilgrimage to the ancient city of Petra in southern Jordan. Thousands of people scratched their names and messages on rocks as they made their way to Petra for pilgrimage. This creates a problem for us. Mecca is unknown in maps and literature before and during the rise of Islam. The descriptions, such as the center of the trade route, the mother of all cities, and the focal point of the ancient pilgrimage, do not fit. How can we solve this? The answer to that comes from Islam itself.
المساجد في الوقت الحاضر تتجه كلها صوب القبلة، صوب الكعبة، وهناك مكان في المسجد يسمى المحراب الذي الإمام يوقف فيه ويصلي يقود المصلين. ولكن في الأيام الماضية ما كان موجود هذا المحراب، ولكن كان في حائط يتجه صوب القبلة، وكان المبنى بالكامل مبني باتجاه صوب القبلة.
In Islam, it is universally understood that the Qibla is towards Mecca and Saudi Arabia. No one questions the direction of the Qibla today. However, the Quran tells Muslims they have a Qibla. The text of the Quran does not give the name of the city to which prayer was originally made. It only mentions Masjid al-Haram, or the forbidden gathering place. Muslims believe they originally prayed towards Jerusalem. According to Islamic sources, in 624 AD, Muhammad changed the Qibla to Mecca. Muhammad revealed this in Surah 2 of the Quran.
Thus we appointed the Qibla to you. Indeed, it was a momentous change, except to those guided by Allah. Allah would never make your faith of no effect. Now, shall we turn you to a Qibla that shall please you? Turn then your face in the direction of the Masjid al-Haram. Wherever you are, turn your faces in that direction.
As a historian of the Arabian Peninsula, I've always been interested in finding the location of the original Qibla. What direction did Muhammad pray towards before the Qibla was changed? Was it Jerusalem, as some claim? Was it Syria, as some claim? Or was it some other direction?
If we were to do this study 100 years ago, it would require an incredible amount of work and research. We would have to travel the world searching ancient sites to find the earliest mosques in Islam. Now, in a few moments, we can do what used to take a lifetime. Google Earth lets us look down on sites from space, and websites like ArcNet can combine the research of hundreds of students and professors. We can examine structures based on various criteria. We choose Islamic buildings, arrange them by date into a chronological list, then determine when they were constructed, check their Qibla direction by using Google Earth, and collate this to determine when the Qibla direction changed towards Mecca. This will give us solid data to work with.
Now, determining the Qibla direction is not an exact science. Some of the early mosques, like this one, are not exactly square. So researchers need to find the Qibla wall and project 90 degrees from that wall. Because early buildings were not square, we cannot use the side walls or the back walls. This is the mihrab of an old mosque. The early Arabs set the Qibla direction using the stars, and they were very accurate. The best way to determine the Qibla direction is to visit the mosque and use an actual accurate GPS unit. Not every mosque can be used for this study. Many of them were totally reconstructed over time, so much so that it is no longer possible to determine their original Qibla direction. However, a number of mosques survive. For instance, there is a mosque called the Mosque of the Two Qiblas in Medina. Islamic history tells us that it was in this very mosque that the companion leading prayers was told of the Qibla change. So he turned around and started praying towards Mecca. The question is, where did he originally face? Muslims have a ready answer. He prayed towards Jerusalem. Now today the Mosque of the Two Qiblas faces Mecca. But in 1987, the mosque was completely torn down so it could be rebuilt. During the construction process, the old foundation was revealed, and they discovered that it did have a Qibla wall that did indeed face north, generally towards Jerusalem. And so Muslims believe originally the Qibla was towards Jerusalem.
There is a simple way that this can be put to the test. If we go to the earliest mosques that were built, where we can identify their direction of prayer, we can plot them on a map and see if their lines converge. We'll find one of three things. They all point in different directions. They all point to Jerusalem, or they all point to another location. After the Mosque of the Two Qiblas in Saudi Arabia, there are a further 11 early surviving mosques that we can research. These are located in China, Egypt, southern Jordan, Lebanon, central Jordan, Yemen, Israel, Iraq, Jerusalem, West Bank, and lastly Lebanon. So if we go in the order that they were built, the second surviving mosque was built in Guangzhou, China. Guangzhou is the modern name for what was known as the city of Canton.
When Marco Polo reached this city in 1300 AD, he discovered over 100,000 Arab and Persian merchants living there. You see, the Arabs had been trading with the Chinese for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is all well documented. And so Abu Waqas, an uncle of Muhammad, traveled to China on a trade mission. And according to Chinese manuscripts, he built a mosque for the Arabs in Canton in 627 AD, or 6 years after the founding of Islam. I personally examined this mosque and used a GPS unit to determine the mosque's Qibla direction. What I found was surprising. This mosque does not face Mecca. It faces 12 degrees north of Mecca, meaning that it does not face Jerusalem either. Its Qibla passes south of Jerusalem.
The next mosque was built in 641 AD, about 20 years after the founding of Islam, in the town of Fustat, just outside of Cairo.
This mosque was rebuilt and enlarged several times, so that today the original foundation is no longer evident. However, a description of the original ground plan of the mosque survives, and the Islamic records tell us that the first Qibla pointed east and later had to be corrected towards the south, towards Mecca.
The next surviving Islamic building is the Umayyad Palace, built here at Humayma in southern Jordan.
Around 700 AD, or about 80 years after the founding of Islam, the Abbas family built a large manor house here. This house had no special mosque area. Rather, the faithful would line up here in the courtyard to pray. This house has a Qibla direction, but it is not towards Jerusalem.
The following year, a new mosque was built in Baalbek in Lebanon. Notice that its Qibla does not point to Mecca.
1 year later, the Umayyads built a large and impressive mosque here on the citadel in Amman, Jordan. This mosque points south. Mecca is over there.
A couple of years after this, in 705 AD, or 84 years after the founding of Islam, Muslims constructed the Great Mosque of Sana'a in the capital city of Yemen. While this mosque points in the general direction of Mecca, it actually points to the west of Jerusalem.
The following year, in 706 AD, the Umayyad Muslim rulers built Khirbat al-Minya, a large palace complex in Israel on the shores of Galilee. This palace complex had a specific room used as a mosque. According to the inscription set into a gateway, it was built 87 years after the founding of Islam by the Muslim ruler Al-Walid. This building and its mosque do not face Jerusalem. That same year, the Muslims also built the Wasit Mosque in Iraq. Originally, archaeologists claimed that this mosque pointed to Jerusalem. However, further research has shown that this mosque points south of Jerusalem.
The next mosque is the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem itself. This mosque is not the temple dome, but rather the old mosque to the south of the dome. This mosque is already in Jerusalem, but it also has a Qibla. And it does not point to Mecca. The next mosque we come to was built in 724 AD, 103 years after the founding of Islam. This is the Khirbat al-Mafja Mosque near Jericho in the Jordan Valley. This palace was built near the end of the Umayyad dynasty. By looking at the floor plan, we can see that the palace and its mosque faced south rather than towards Mecca. That same year, a mosque was built at Anjar, about 58 kilometers from Beirut. It was built near the end of the Umayyad period, and no more than 30 years later, it fell into ruins and eventually was abandoned. Since it was never rebuilt, we can easily determine the Qibla direction, which does not point towards Mecca or Jerusalem. Now, let's put this all together onto one map. The result is amazing. During the first 100 years of Islam, 100% of all the surviving mosques we have located so far face a spot in southern Jordan rather than Mecca. From north, south, east, and west, mosques all face towards one spot. This isn't some small error in determining the Qibla direction. They all specifically point to just one place.
Directly under this point is the ancient city of Petra. This is a city that is well known to us today. It is a popular tourist site. Tourists come from all over the world to marvel at the great temples and the monuments in this city. Could it be that Petra is the mother of all cities described in the Quran? It was the focus of the ancient Arab pilgrimage. So could Petra also be the birthplace of Muhammad and the founding city of Islam?
دان غريب، يعني أنت تقول إن البتراء لكن البخاري يقول لنا هي القدس. فشلون تبي نفكر في هذا الأمر؟ شلون تبينا نقبل هذا الشيء؟ يعني البخاري قال لنا القدس.
Every good Muslim tells me that Muslims used to pray towards Jerusalem. They know this because Bukhari tells them this. And I agree, Bukhari says it was Jerusalem. But Bukhari is writing some 200 years after Muhammad, and he's writing more than 100 years after the Qibla change took place. So he's not an eyewitness. He's just collecting what people are remembering. And he actually notes several conflicting ideas that were circulating at the time.